Turn left and turn right. Turn right and turn right. Turn left and turn right.
Lost booze, why they had so confused? Whatever the answer, take this one is from me. Drug abuse we can have up in this country. Tell the children that Sparrows and do you smoke, don't take no dope. Learn to tell them in the party, no cocaine, no amphetamine. Dynamite go blow when the fuse is lit. Don't let nobody fool you, kid. Go that night. You can be a hit. Remember what you read from each with Golden Night. Right now. Only was undercover. Gotta find me a new lady, one who loves and calls me baby, sincerely. Searching so long, yeah. Must have been looking in the wrong direction. Whenever the moon is full, and my cup is running over. Love is not undercover. Oh, never say never, no way. Oh no. Feel my heart beating for you. Love is so true. Yeah, love is so true. Darling, love is so true. Yeah. Maybe I never say I'm sorry. Oh yes, love's gonna get you in a hurry.
Sponsored by
Yes it is.
YUWISE.com. YUWISE.
But love is so true. Love is so true.
And the 95 South into Miami, Florida.
Only you alone do.
Listening to some music from YUWISE Radio
Love
Network.
is not undercover.
And this one is from Dennis Imama Brown, Prince of Reggae.
Gotta find a new lady. Whenever the moon is full, and my cup is running over. Love is not undercover. Oh, I never say I'm sorry. Feel my heart's beating for you. Love is so true. Love is so true. Andrea, baby, love is so true. Darling, my love is so true. Love is so true. Love is so true.
Hello and welcome to the Engineering Circuit Analysis Tutor. I'm very excited to teach this course because
And
I'm an
of
electrical
course,
engineer
we listen
myself,
to
so
some
I was always very
electrical
interested in
lectures.
electricity and electric circuits, things like that. So what we're going to do in this class is exactly what the title is. We're going to learn all about circuits. We're going to learn about electricity. We're going to learn about the components that go into circuits. But mostly, what you do in engineering courses is learn how to analyze them. Given a circuit, what is going on? Where is the current going? What is the purpose of the circuit? And so there's a lot of details there and a lot of techniques that
YUWISE
have been
Radio
developed over
Network.
the years to pull those things off. You know, 100 years ago, circuits and all of the things that we take for granted today will be super theoretical. But they're all basically physics. They're taking energy out of a battery or energy out of a wall
welcome to the
and
ride.
letting it run around in a loop and doing some useful work with it.
It's
That
not a
work
road
might
trip.
be spinning a motor, right, to spin a fan. Or that work might be shooting a radio wave out
Next time,
across the world
wait,
to
Tom.
talk to somebody else. Or that work might be
Into
going to a
Miami.
microprocessor and flip a bunch of bits around and add a bunch of numbers together, basically create what we call a computer. But there's basically infinite number of ways that you could create circuits to do what we want them to do. But before you can understand a microchip, before you can understand an amplifier, before you can understand a nuclear power plant, you have to start at the basics. You have to start at the really, really simple questions, the things that are so fundamental. And that's what we're going to do in this course. We're going to start with fundamentals, and then we're going to go on and talk about circuits and the different kinds of circuits, how to analyze circuits, figure out what's happening inside these circuits. And you'll find that there's a broad array of tools that you learn in your classes to help you with that. Now, I'll say right away, the title of this guy is Engineering Circuit Analysis, but my goal is to really try to make it as accessible as possible to anybody out here who wants to learn it, right? Don't let the word engineering scare you too much. Engineering is a big word, makes it sound really hard, but I'm going to try to break things down so that everyone can get it. Now, I will say the good news is, and this is true, with circuits in general, there really aren't that many big picture concepts to understand. In this section, we're going to talk about voltage, current, and resistance because they're so important. But really, once you get past that, there's a few other big picture concepts, and then you understand really the basics. The challenge with circuits comes is that I can draw a circuit on the board, and you might know how to analyze it. You can figure out what's going on. And then I might change one little line, one little branch of the circuit might completely change how the thing operates, right? So there's an infinite variety in how they can be constructed. That's what really requires you to get a lot of practice. And that's what this course is going to be. It's centered around practice, 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 practice. And to be honest with you, you don't need to know much more than algebra to do very, very well in this class. Yes, we are going to use complex numbers a little bit later on, later in the course, not in the beginning. We are going to use some calculus and integration later on in the course. But by and large, you can do a ton of circuit analysis with just some basic algebra. And that's the way I'm going to try to teach it to you so that, you know, everybody is accessible to everybody while also catering to the engineering student, which is really the focus of the class. All right, so I had to figure out where to start. I think the most important thing for everyone watching this to understand is the concepts of voltage, current, and resistance. Because those three things we're going to end up zooming in on and talking about for the next many, many hours. And you really have to understand what they are. A lot of students, if they haven't already had an interest in circuits, they get very confused at what the difference between voltage and current is. And how does resistance play into that? So what we're going to do in this particular section is zoom in on that. And I want you to really make sure you internalize and understand what they mean. Because as you go and solve a circuit, and I'm asking you what the voltage is, you need to kind of have an internal picture of what that means, even before you do any math. So there's no math in this section. You know, this is all definitions. I try to make it as interesting as I can, but it's so incredibly important. Make sure you understand this. First things first, I think we all know this. What is an electric circuit? What is a circuit? I mean, a lot of people think they know what a circuit is, and most people probably do, but what is a circuit? The simplest one-sentence definition is it's a closed loop that carries. What does it carry? What do you think? Electricity. You know, like I say, I have to start somewhere, and I never assume that you know anything about what I'm talking about. So, a circuit. You think about a circuit of a racetrack or a circuit in the Indy 500. It has to go all the way around. If you don't have it going all the way back around to the starting point, then you don't have a circuit. And no electricity can flow in such a situation unless it goes all the way back around to where you start from. So, in order to have a circuit, it has to come back to where it starts from. So a simple example of that, without really getting into any kind of detail, is you know, here's a source. I'm going to put a plus minus to denote it as a source. This could be a battery. You know, this could be a battery that you pull out of, you go buy it at the store. And we're not going to put anything in the circuit with it. We're just going to draw these lines here. These lines are wires. So it would be just like you might think. You get a battery, you hook a wire up that goes all the way back around to the other side. This completes a circuit. The electricity can circle around and around and around here, coming from one terminal back around to the other one. That means it's a circuit. Super, super important, but you know, also very simple as well. Now let's get to something that's not quite so simple, but you know, a lot of people still may understand this. What is current? And when I say current, I mean electric. So spell current first of all. Current. Electric current. What is electric current? Okay, the simplest definition to write down for what electric current is, it is the flow of electrons in a circuit. It's the flow of electrons in a circuit. So everybody's heard of current, electric current. An analogy to electric current would be current in a stream. We all know what a current is in a stream, right? It's when the stream is moving. There's a current. It's pushing your boat, right? It's the movement of something. Don't confuse that, because a lot of people get confused with voltage and current if you're not really familiar with these terms. Voltage has really nothing to do with anything moving. We'll talk about what voltage is in a minute. The current, the electric current, think of a stream, think of something moving. That is what's moving. So in real life, if you have a piece of wire, which is metal, the electrons are really and truly what's moving around in that wire. So if you wanted to kind of zoom in and draw a little picture of that, you could draw another little circuit here, a simple one anyway, like this. Goes up, connected all the way back around the beginning. So there's going to be current circulating around and around and around. But if I zoomed in, let's say this is a piece of wire, right? If I zoom in, this wire, get a microscope up on top of it and zoom in on it really, really tight. If I could see that, what I would see inside is a bunch of atoms, right? So this atom is going to have a positive nucleus, and this atom is going to have a negative electron orbiting around this atom. Now, in real life, this might be, copper wire. So there'll be lots of protons in the nucleus and lots of electrons. But for the purpose of this drawing, just pretend that there's a positive center and there's a negative things orbiting. Now here's another atom here. It's got a positive center and it's got a negative thing orbiting. This one's got a positive and a negative. Every atom has this positive center and negative surrounding. Now in metals like copper and gold and silver that conduct electricity well, these electrons, they're not really tightly held to the atom. They're there, but they can be coerced, so to speak, to move. They can be, you can talk them into moving if you try hard enough. The object that actually talks them into moving is the battery, right? Is the battery, or the source coming from your wall, for instance. And when that happens, when you hook a battery up to this wire like this, since these electrons are not really, really held on terribly tightly, what happens is this electron, down here, this electron is going to jump, literally, it's going to jump over and grab it and go into the orbit of the next atom. And at that moment, the same time that happens, it's a chain reaction. This guy goes to the next guy. This electron moves to this guy, and this electron moves to its adjacent atom. And this process happens almost at the speed of light, so you can't see this electron movement, but that's what's in fact happening. So it's a chain reaction, and they're almost like in lockstep, moving from one atom to the next. And this movement is really, you can think of it as energy of motion, is the energy that the circuit uses to do whatever it's going to do. Turn a fan, turn a light bulb on, whatever. That's where the energy from the battery is going. It's going into pushing these electrons around, which is electric current. So when I draw this here, I'm drawing these negative electrons moving. So this is what we call electron current, or electric current. There's another way to say that. So the electrons, if you want to think of it this way, I'm going to draw it down here. This is the negative terminal of the battery. This is where the negative charges are sort of piled up. So here, this is called the electric current. So the electrons literally bleed out of this negative terminal. They go all the way around, and they go back and they enter it back into the positive terminal, because this is positive, so it's going to attract the negative electrons. And this process goes on and on and on until the battery basically dies out, if it's a battery and it can't supply any more electrons, or if it's a wall, it just keeps going and going forever and you get charged for it, right? It comes from the power plant. But the electrons are really and truly what's moving. Now, let me blow your mind a little bit here. In a basic circuits course, like a hobby book, like, go to Barnes & Noble or somewhere and just get a book on electricity. They'll talk about the electrons moving. But when you get into engineering and you really start trying to analyze how a circuit's going to really behave, it's a little bit cumbersome to talk about the electrons moving, even though that's really what's happening in real life. The reason that it's a little bit cumbersome is because, really one reason, electrons have a negative charge. They have a negative charge. And what we're going to do later on is we're going to have a circuit and we're going to write equations, simple algebra equations, so don't get too worried about it, but they're going to be equations, and they're going to describe how the current is moving. If we do that for a bunch of negative electrons, then we're going to have negative signs running around all of our equations for our electric circuits. And that would totally work, totally work. However, it's a little cumbersome to have negative signs running around all of our equations. So in real life, from this moment on, I'm just teaching you this to give you background, but from this moment on, we're not really going to talk about electron current flow or electric current flow. We're not really going to be talking about the direction of the electrons are moving. Let me show you what we are going to talk about. In this very same wire, you may have to stare at this a little while to realize this, but I think you should be able to convince yourself that since this charge is jumping this direction, for a temporary moment, like we're talking about a chain reaction, right? This one goes here, then this one goes here, and this one goes here. But at the very moment that this negative charge jumps away, for a split second, this atom has lost an electron, right? So it's an electrically neutral atom. It's zero charge altogether because the electrons and the protons cancel out. They're the same number. But as soon as I lose one of these electrons, I have sort of a positive charge left over, right? Same thing happens here. When I lose this guy for a split moment, I have a positive charge here. So as these negative charges jump this direction, mathematically it's the same thing as pretending that I have positive charges jumping this direction, the opposite direction, because this guy's lost an electron, and then the guy before it loses one before it. So as these guys move this way, it's the same as saying mathematically a positive charge goes the other direction. I hope that makes sense to you qualitatively based on my drawing here, but if it doesn't, all you really have to remember is that the real current that we talk about in engineering is called the whole current. And it goes in the opposite direction from the electric current, which is the real life thing that's happening. And it's a mathematical convenience. Because since now, instead of talking about negative electrons moving this way, we talk about positive charges moving this way. Now we have positive charges in all of our equations. And all of our equations have rid themselves of all these negative signs, or at least a lot of the negative signs, right? And it makes it a lot easier to deal with. So it's really saving you time, if you think about it that way, saving you the thought process. So the real electrons are going this way, but we pretend that we have
YUWISE Radio Network.
positive charges going the same
YUWISE.com.
The reason it's called a hole current is because for a split second,
YUWISE.com.
when this electron leaves, it's left like a hole behind.
We are taking
on
a
this
ride
atom, making that positive. So
into Miami.
the whole current actually comes out of the positive terminal like this, right? And we say, we denote that current I in electrical engineering or in engineering, and it's the whole current. This is such an important concept that you really should not go on until you truly internalize and make sure. Basically, all you need to remember in the big picture is that anytime you have a circuit, the source is going to always have a positive and a negative terminal, always, just like any battery. If you pull a battery out of the box, you'll see one side's labeled positive, one side's labeled negative. In real life, if you hook the battery up to something, electrons are really the objects that come around from the negative terminal back to the positive. But in electrical or in any kind of an engineering course, when you're taking a circuits class, you never, ever, ever talk about the electron flow in this direction, this way. You always instead talk about the positive current flow. It's the same value going in opposite directions, and it makes the equations much, much simpler. And in fact, all the power calculations, the function of the circuit, the energy, everything is completely and totally described by talking about this sort of like this pretend current that's going in the opposite way. So just get used to seeing that. You're always going to pretend that your current's coming out of the positive terminal, even though in reality the electrons are bleeding out the other side. Now, the units of electric current. I told you briefly. Current is denoted I, right? I. It probably is some history to it. You could go look it up. You would think current would be called C, but it's not. It's called I. So anytime you see I labeled in a circuit, that is the electric, or that's the current flowing through that branch of the circuit, or something of that nature. Now, what are the units of current? A lot of you have already heard this. Units, let's go ahead and change colors a little bit. The units for current is the ampere, which is also called an amp, right? Or you can call it simply A, right? The higher the number of amps, the the higher the current going through the circuit. Basically, an ampere is telling you how many charges are moving through your circuit per second. And there's a definition in physics that you can go look up for that, and that's fine. It's not terribly important because, really we're always talking in circuits. In a physics class, you'd be talking about an individual charge, and there's so many coulombs on a charge moving, right? But in a circuit, you've got billions of charges in this guy. So you don't talk about coulombs and how many coulombs of charge are crossing through a boundary. You just look at the aggregate, which is how many amperes, which is a coulomb per second. How many coulombs per second
In
really
1
are
mile,
going through
turn
that guy.
left.
So an ampere represents how many coulombs of charge are passing. If you would slice this wire and watch how many go through there, that would be how many coulombs of charge go through there per second. But really, you don't have to deal with that too much in a circuits class. We're always going to be talking about amps or amperes. So bringing it back to the everyday language that everybody already knows. You've heard of amps, right? Everybody's heard of amps. That is the current flow. The higher the number of amps in that circuit is the more it can potentially kill you, right? It doesn't take much current to kill a person, actually, believe it or not. So you might have a car stereo that has, a 10 amp amplifier, right? It means 10 amps of current flowing around that amplifier because to push the sound into those speakers and get them to move really loud, you need a lot of physical electricity to do that, right? To actually get it to move like that. But in a computer, inside of a microchip, you might have a teeny tiny amount of current going around because those are very delicate circuits. You might have a milliamp or a microamp inside of those guys. But the base unit of current is always going to be the ampere, which is what we have right here. All right. So to sum it up, which is really so important, I keep talking about it. Current, in general, in real life, is the flow of electrons. However, in all circuits from henceforth that we're going to talk about, we're not even going to talk about this. We're just going to say the current comes out of the positive terminal, and the unit is ampere. That's really the bottom line. All right. Now, the next thing we have is the concept of voltage, which many people get confused with current because it's kind of used interchangeably. Voltage is the push, I'll put in quotes, the push that causes the current to flow.
Turn left.
So in other words, it's the source, right? It's the source. So when you look at a 9-volt battery, that battery comes in a physical size. It has 9 volts. 9 volts is a relative indicator to tell you how much oomph, for lack of a better word, that battery can push in a circuit. So the current and the voltage are very, very closely related. You cannot have any current flowing without something pushing it. And so you have to have some source there to push it, which is usually a battery or a wall socket or something like that, and that's always measured in volts. So when you see on TV, oh boy, you could be killed by 10,000 volts. Well, 10,000 volts is not really how much current is flowing through you. That's just how much push there is. So to kind of bring it down to layman's term, think about a straw. Pretend this were a soda straw that you get at a restaurant, right? And let's say it's a pretty narrow straw, like almost like a straw that you use to stir your coffee, okay? Now, if I blow on it like this, then I'm going to be pushing air through that straw. The current is the air that's actually moving through the straw, right? That's what the current is. That's what's actually doing the movement and doing the work, all right? Now, I'm actually blowing on it, so I'm actually increasing the pressure at the end of that thing. That's causing the current to move. That's the voltage. The push that I give it, the pressure that I give it, is what's actually